My wife believed her daughter's lies and kicked me out. 3 weeks later, she demanded an apology, so I handed her divorce papers instead. Her daughter completely lost it. Hello, Reddit I plus here. If you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd lose everything because of a lie, I'd have laughed and said my marriage was the one thing in life I could bet on. My name's Gavin, I'm 46, and until last year, I thought I'd finally built something solid. A home that felt safe, a woman who stood by me, and a daughter I was learning to care for like my own. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I met Ruth, I was crawling out of a bad place. My last business had collapsed. My reputation was in shambles, and I'd been sleeping on a friend's couch for months, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Ruth came into my life like calm after a storm. She worked in accounting at a logistics company, practical and confident, the kind of woman who had everything together. I remember our first dinner. She ordered a glass of red wine and told me straight up, "I don't fix men. If you're looking for that, keep walking." That honesty was what hooked me. When I decided to rebuild, Ruth was the one who pushed me forward. She helped me draw up budgets, kept me grounded, even invested a small part of her savings into the business I started later. I told everyone I knew that she wasn't just my wife. She was the reason I stood back on my feet. And then there was her daughter, Tessa, 18, when I first moved into their house. Quiet, distant, and always watching me with eyes that measured everything I said. I tried to bridge the gap, helped her study for exams, bought her a used car so she could get to college classes, even helped her get a part-time job at a bookstore. She was polite enough when Ruth was around, but there was always a cold edge in her tone, something I couldn't quite name. The first time Ruth defended her daughter over me, it seemed small. Tessa had used my company laptop to stream something and crashed it with a virus. When I told her she shouldn't touch my work device, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "It's just a laptop, relax." When I brought it up later, Ruth sighed. "She's under a lot of stress, Gav. Let it go." And I did, because I loved Ruth, and I wanted peace. But soon, the digs became constant. Tessa would make snide comments at dinner. Must be nice running a business from home. Some people actually have jobs. Or she'd drop little lies that Ruth somehow believed. Gavin yelled at me for no reason. Or, he doesn't like me being here. Each time, Ruth's tone toward me softened less. She stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped reaching for my hand on the couch. I didn't realize it then, but I was slowly becoming a guest in my own house. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny the things you remember. The smell of rain outside, the hum of the fridge, the fact that I'd been thinking of surprising Ruth with dinner. When I walked into the house, both of them were waiting. Ruth sat stiffly on the couch, her hands clenched. Tessa stood by the wall, her face pale but her eyes alert, like she'd been rehearsing something. "Gavin," Ruth said quietly. "We need to talk." Her voice didn't sound like her. It was empty, rehearsed. Then Tessa began to cry. The kind of trembling cry that didn't quite sound real. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. He's been making me uncomfortable. The way he looks at me. The things he says. It's not right." The world stopped. For a second I thought she was joking. But Ruth's face told me she wasn't. "What?" I said, stunned. "You can't actually believe that." Ruth stood up, eyes wild. "Did you do something to my daughter?" "Of course not, Ruth. You know me." Before I could say more, she slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed through the living room. My cheek burned, but what hurt worse was the look on her face. Disgust, disbelief, betrayal. She pointed to the hallway. "Pack your things." Now I tried explaining. I told her I never touched Tessa, never said a thing to make her uncomfortable. I told her the girl was lying, but Ruth just kept shaking her head. "You need to go before I call the police." I looked at Tessa. Her tears had stopped, and for the briefest second she smirked. A tiny, triumphant smile that made my stomach turn. That was when I knew there was no winning, so I packed. My hands shook the whole time. As I wheeled my suitcase to the door, Ruth stood blocking the exit, staring at me like I was someone she'd never met. "I hope someday you understand what you did," she said. I didn't reply. I just walked out. I stayed at a friend's place for weeks, didn't eat much, didn't sleep either. I sent Ruth message after message, asking her to hear me out, to at least talk. Nothing. Then, 3 weeks later, she showed up at my office. She looked tired, but she carried herself like she owned the place. "I want an apology," she said, "for what you did, and for walking out like that." I stared at her, speechless. "You kicked me out, Ruth. You didn't even ask for proof." She crossed her arms. "Tessa's my daughter." I believed her. "And now?" I asked. "She's upset that you've been telling people lies about her," she said coldly. "You need to make it right, and compensate her for the emotional damage you caused." That was the moment I stopped feeling anything. I reached into my drawer, pulled out a brown envelope, and slid it across the desk. She looked confused until she saw what it was. Divorce papers. Her face went pale. "You're ending this over a misunderstanding?" she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "I'm ending this because the woman I loved trusted a lie more than she trusted me." Word spread fast. Ruth told her family I'd walked out on them. Tessa played the victim online, posting vague quotes about toxic men. But 3 months later, the truth came out. One of Tessa's friends, drunk at a party, mentioned that Tessa had made up the story because she hated me for trying to act like her dad. Someone recorded it and sent it to Ruth's brother, who sent it to her. I heard about it from him before Ruth ever called. When she finally did, her voice was shaking. "Gavin, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" I told her the same thing I told the court clerk when I signed the final papers. "No, Ruth, some things you don't come back from. I sold the house we'd bought together, gave her the furniture, kept only my books, my dog, and my peace. People think revenge means getting even, ruining the other person's life, but the real revenge, the one that lasts, is simply walking away untouched, while the people who wronged you are left with the silence they created." Tessa's off at college now. Ruth's alone. And me, I rebuilt again. Slower, quieter, stronger. Because when someone believes a lie over your truth, you learn the most painful lesson of all. Love can blind you, but betrayal will make you see everything clearly. If guilt had a sound, it would be the echo of a slammed door. That's the sound that's haunted me every night since Gavin left. It's been 9 months now. 9 months of trying to sleep in a house that feels colder, emptier, and somehow louder without him in it. Every floorboard creak sounds like his footsteps. Every shadow looks like the shape of his suitcase as he walked out. And every time I close my eyes, I see my daughter crying, and that faint, terrible smirk I didn't notice back then. The truth came to me not like lightning, but like a slow dawn. It started with a phone call. My brother Greg called one evening, his tone cautious. "Ruth," he said, "you need to hear something. And I'm not saying this to hurt you." He played me a voice memo someone had sent him. A recording from a college party. The sound was muffled, but clear enough. Tessa's voice. Laughing. Boasting. Of course I made it up. I wanted him gone. He was ruining everything. Mom always took his side. So, I flipped it on him. Worked like a charm. The laughter that followed still echoes in my chest like glass breaking. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I remember the thud it made. My knees gave out right after. That was the moment I realized I had destroyed a good man's life to protect a lie. I confronted Tessa that night. She tried to deny it at first. Said it was just a joke. When I showed her the recording, her eyes filled with tears. Not from guilt, but fear. "Mom, please," she begged. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could do that, but all that came out was a whisper. "You let me hate him for you. You let me destroy him." Tessa crumbled to the floor, sobbing. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at my reflection in the window. A stranger, wearing my face. I realized something then. When you choose to believe a lie, you become part of it. I tried to reach Gavin. I called, texted, emailed. No response. I even drove to his office one afternoon. He saw me through the glass, paused, and then quietly told his assistant to say he wasn't available. I stood there for a long time, humiliated, before leaving a note on his car. It just said, "You were right. I'm sorry. I'll never forgive myself." He never replied, and I don't blame him. The guilt started eating at Tessa. Her grades plummeted. She lost her part-time job. People on campus found out about the recording, and she became a pariah overnight. She came home crying one weekend saying, "Everyone hates me. They keep calling me a liar." I wanted to tell her that maybe she needed to feel that, to understand what it means to destroy someone's name. But she was still my daughter, and I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I just told her, this is what lies do. They always find their way home. 3 months later, an envelope came in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Gavin's handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Ruth, you once saved me when my life was falling apart. I wish I could say I hate you for what happened. But the truth is, I don't. I just can't ever trust you again. I hope someday you find peace with yourself, not with me. Gavin." I cried for hours. Not the sharp kind of crying that comes from anger or loss. The deep, silent kind that leaves you hollow afterward, because I knew then he was gone for good. Tessa eventually transferred schools, trying to outrun her reputation. I sold the house a year later. Too many ghosts. I moved into a small apartment near the coast. I walk every evening now, watching the sunset dip into the sea, thinking about how quickly a person's trust can be destroyed. People say time heals everything, but that's a lie people tell themselves to feel better. Time doesn't heal guilt. It just teaches you how to carry it more quietly. Sometimes, I imagine running into Gavin somewhere, maybe at a cafe or a bookstore. I picture him older, calm, still with that steady look he always had. I'd tell him I finally understand what I threw away, but I know he wouldn't say a word. He'd just give me that same quiet nod and walk past, because he already gave me the only thing I deserved, his silence. Here's what I learned the hard way. Trust is like glass. You can apologize, you can pick up the shards, but no matter how carefully you glue them back together, the cracks will always show. And when the truth finally comes, and it always does, you don't get to choose what it breaks first.